So like, what do you find are the main kind of reasons why people want to do kind of public speaking training?
Oh, it's such a big topic, isn't it, Steve? And everybody is different.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's different. Confidence is a massive factor because it goes up and down, and it doesn't matter how confident you seem on the outside either as well. It can ebb and flow
Mm-hmm.
over the course of a day and an hour and all the rest of it. There is definitely a fear factor of I'm going to make a fool of myself, or I'm going to let myself down, or let my team down, or look like an idiot, and that can really come into play. And there's so much stuff I can give you. One thing I think a lot of people don't pay enough attention to, if that's maybe the way to describe it, is that it's the skill.
Mm-hmm.
The more you do it, whatever that looks like, the better you will get. I absolutely guarantee. It's a bit like saying, go and do a driving test, but don't have any lessons. What? Create someone's wedding cake, but no recipe, and never bake a cake before you attempt it for the first time. Literally. I always say, take every opportunity you can.
Mm-hmm.
To practice your speaking, which can be a really terrifying prospect, I realise, for a lot of people. But it's almost like, does somebody want to do a 5-minute debrief at the end of our next meeting? Put your hand up. Mm-hmm. Take the opportunity to do the things that don't seem so scary. So not the who wants to do the keynote at our next international conference. If that's too far, leave that one. Okay, all right, and do the debrief. Okay, or even the video call to explain 2 minutes on this, whatever that looks like for you. Because if you can do that, you feel a little bit more that didn't go so badly. Right, okay, great. Then take that and then do the next one. And the more you practice, the easier it will become. I mean, when I used to take a holiday from being a barrister, so I'd literally take 2 weeks off or whatever, I would get back and I'd have a 3-day, 5-day hearing as soon as I got back. And the first day was always horrible because genuinely, and I did this as a job, genuinely, I'd have that slightly sort of, oh, can I speak? Is it going to come out? Oh, no, that didn't sound very, because you had to sort of get yourself back up to speed again because you've been away from it for 2 weeks and it was only 2 weeks. And by day 2, it's all fine. And, oh, yes, I remember how we roll here. Off we go, and off you go again. But it's no different. And sometimes I work with people and say, oh, well, I the last time I did this was 6 months ago. Well, with the best will in the world, it will feel nervous making. I mean, if it was, I had a big gap when the pandemic hit. All my, as I'm sure many of your listeners will understand, my business just fell off a cliff, literally fell off a cliff. So I had the whole summer, so it all kicked off in February, March, and I had the whole summer booked in with back-to-back training in person. And it all just got either cancelled or a lot of people were very good and said, we'll pick it up again when we can, but we can't at the moment. And for a few months, I was like, what am I going to do? And then in the end, I took it back and I did it online. But I remember and it was the same content, albeit I had to fiddle with it a bit to make it work. And I remember doing it for the first time, absolutely terrified, thinking, oh, well, first of all, I was thinking, is this actually going to work online? Ooh. And I don't do tech, Steve. It terrifies me. It really does. Tech is not so I understand that people I work with maybe feel the same way I feel about tech. So that's my point of empathy, is that I kind of think, okay, you feel like this, how I feel about anything tech. But once I'd started and I'd realized, oh, yes, okay. And I got my rhythm again, and then I'm doing it regularly, then it becomes easier. And it's kind of no less for speaking and communicating, I guess. But I don't know whether you were sort of thinking tips for managing your nerves and feeling more control.
Well, I still find it funny because even before we came on air, and I've done over 90 of these now, I still get a little bit nervous. So I do my Amy Cuddy power poses, and like we both stand up. It's something we talked about as well.
Yeah. I'm standing now, and you're standing. Yeah.
But it's just, you've probably seen, I move around, but I can't sit still. And what's quite funny is that if I'm terrible on video calls when I'm sat down, because it looks like I'm disinterested, but I move about in my seat. I must be a nightmare in the cinema. It was actually, for me, I like to stand up and I like to gesticulate and I like to just bounce around a little bit just because that's what I'm like. And it's just,
No, this is so cool because I've never met someone who stands up like I do, which is awesome. And it's the one I share this with my clients when I work with them in group training, and actually say, because when you're through the screen, your positioning is so crucial, because to get through a screen, basically when you communicate through a screen, you'll know this, it's a bit like putting a blanket over yourself. Literally throwing a blanket over yourself, because it muffles everything. So you actually have to work harder to get through the screen, to make the connection with people through the screen. And for me and my style of communicating, and it's not the same for everybody, we're all completely different, but if I don't have that freedom to move around and be stood and use that energy, it feels very weird. And like you said, and it's a really good one to try. For any listeners out there, try it. If you're thinking, I'm not going to stand up all day, Joe, that's fine. But try, if you've got a presentation online, if you've got an important meeting where you know you're going to be asked a few tricky questions or whatever it is, try just for that 20 minutes, half an hour, try standing up. I promise you, absolute game changer, promise. I always advise people as well to do phone calls standing up. Difficult phone calls, do it standing up. Because it translates in your voice. It will come out, you know, down the phone for sure, definitely. But if you're going to stand up, don't forget you need to adjust your screen. You're going to have to get the ironing board and get the Amazon boxes and do a bit of stacking up and a bit of readjusting, because you need your camera and your lens that you're looking into, because that's where you should be looking. I still need loads of people.
So basically, this is someone that is obsessive about every detail, about everything. So when I first started doing the podcast and the interviews, for the first 10 guests or so, I had my laptop, but I would look into the camera all thing. And when I watched them back, because I have to, because I edit them, it was a bit creepy. And the thing was, it was like I'm psychotic, where it didn't feel comfortable as a viewer watching someone when someone's eyeballing you really hard for like an hour. For me, it didn't work. So what I do in this current setup, I view my Zoom window, but just above the camera. So it looks like I'm looking in your general direction. When you speak, people watch your window anyway, so they can't see me. Or they can, but you know what I mean? But it's not as creepy. And that's just the personal take on it. But so I purposely don't look into the camera, apart from when I do the intro, because I'm worried about the experience on the other end, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. So I always say to people to look at their green dot, only because I still probably meet at least 60% of people who look at themselves.
Oh, I hate that. I hate that.
Or are looking somewhere else, like down here the whole time. And it's still really common, Steve. So
I agree with you.
Yeah, so I always say, we always have a discussion, where's the green dot or where's the lens? And of course, if you're very important, and I do agree with you, you don't want to be necessarily looking at it the whole time, but a lot of the time, and if you're speaking to a group, check in with the group. So I always do a sort of, okay, so Tina, you're here on my screen. Tony, you're just off to the right. I'm looking at Tony. Now I'm down here. I'm looking at you, Steve. Sandra, you're in the middle. Linda, you're off to the left. And I show what it looks like when I move away and when I go around the screen. But I see really visibly on the faces of the people in my group when somebody who's not been looking at their camera suddenly looks at their camera, and you can just see people going, oh, and they feel like somebody's actually engaging and trying to connect with them, which is obviously what we're trying to do when we're through a screen, which is so hard. But I just want to be back in person more. Please, can we do more back in person?
Because the other thing that you're very good at is gesticulating with your hands on camera, if that makes sense. Because again, so much of your communication is with that. It's part of the reason why I like to stand up and I zoom out a little bit, so you can kind of see me kind of waist up. But a lot of people don't think this, and it's just, especially with, let's face it, we're all kind of bored of Zoom now. But there are ways to, like, you're just like firecracker. The energy that you bring through the screen is like off the charts. So it's, you know, that's your job. But it's nice as where I've interviewed guests before, and it is like pulling teeth. And we're 38 minutes in now, I'm just like, please just make it end. Please just make it end. As where it's nice to just talk to good people. And the truth is, I think it does come across. So if you were to give people like 3 top tips to just gain that little bit more confidence in what they're doing, be it online or in person or whatever, what would it be?
Don't forget to breathe. I know this sounds really obvious. This is actually a really good one as well if you want to feel more in control of your nerves which if you feel more in control of your nerves, you will feel more confident. And we do often forget to breathe, or we don't breathe properly when we do our speaking. So shall I do a little, this is a really good tip exercise, which might be really useful. Literally all you're going to do, we can do it together, Steve. All you're going to do is you're just going to breathe in for three, and then pause at the top of your breath. So literally hold your breath just for a split second. Don't hyperventilate or anything, just for a split second. And then let your breath out again. And that's it. So you just breathe in for 3, nice steady breath in, pause at the top, and then breathe out for 3. And what you really want to try and do is make sure, so often we breathe really shallowly. We just do a from the top of our chest, which doesn't give us really good oxygen, which is what we really want. So we breathe nice and deeply. And when you pause at the top, it sort of allows your nervous system to recalibrate. I expand on this a lot more when I do my training, but essentially that's what's happening. And you allow everything to settle. So you've got a chance to kind of gather yourself before you then go and do your bit of speaking. And the brilliant thing about it is that unless you're going and no one knows you're doing it. So it's a kind of little secret tool that no one knows you're doing, which is a good one.
Do you ever get dry mouth?
Yeah, dry mouth is a thing. Dry mouth is a thing. And always have some water. I mean, I've got some now. You've probably got some somewhere in case you, always have some water. And there's nothing, I think people get really nervous. Oh, I can't have a drink. Of course, yeah, crack on, have a drink. Just do whatever you need to do that thing. What was I going to say? I'm going to sound like a stock record. I always think I sound like a stock record when I do my training because I bang on about this till the cows come home. Practicing. We touched on it a little bit already, taking all those opportunities. But if the first time you go and do your presentation or your debriefing in the meeting or your keynote speaking or whatever it might be, the first time you do that and the first time you hear what you're going to say is in front of your audience, how terrible, how horrible is that? That's not, in my view, that's not a good place to be. That's not going to fill you with confidence at all. So I would always say, try and find time to have a little practice. And I know we're also time poor, aren't we, Steve? We're time poor. But even 30 seconds, just 30 seconds, how are you going to start? What are you going to say? What's the first thing you're going to say? And if you practice your first 30 seconds, then by then you'll be a bit more, oh, my voice spoke. That's it. Good. It came out. I knew what I was going to say. I'm okay. No one's laughed. No, nothing's happened. And then usually that's the point that we can settle a little bit more and then and then off we go. So I'd always say, yeah, practice.
Do you use like bullet points?
Yeah, bullet points can be good. Yeah.
Because the other thing that I've noticed as well is you throw in a lot of humor, which...
Do I?
Yes, you do.
Oh, do I?
Yeah, you do. Like, because I speak to a lot of people, I get to vibe off. Do you know a lady called Ashley King?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ashley, I'll tell you a story in a second, but she realised that when I speak to different guests, I act differently. And if she's watching this, she'll see this. And so there's a guy called Doug Dinwiddie, who was on a few weeks ago. Very laddie lad. We were talking about sports, and I went into more lad banter mode. And it depends on who you're talking to. But there's nothing worse than my pet peeve is when you see someone speak on a topic and they're reading off notes and they're literally line by line, and it's like, for fuck's sake, just. And it was a politician once, actually. It was an energy conference in Newcastle, and he lost the room within 10 seconds because he was reading. As where the best people for me, they might have some notes, but they just talk to the room, and it might not be quite as word perfect, but they engage with you. And I just much prefer that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I talk about have some signposts. So if you think of your speaking, and when I say speaking, I'm being very broad and general, whatever it looks like for you. If you think of your speaking as going on a little journey, it could be a 2-minute journey, it could be like a 20-minute journey, and you want to go from the castle to the cathedral, okay? So you need some signposts because you're taking your audience on that journey. And if you don't have the signposts, they're going to take the scenic route via the river and have donuts in the cafe and sit there all morning. And that's a disaster. And you won't get them to where you need them to be. So if you have your signposts, then you can keep them on track. But also for those of us who might have a little ramble or like a bit of a waffle, it kind of keeps us on track as well, which can be really useful. And even if you've only got 3 or 4 or 5 signposts of those headings of where you know you're going, your topics, whatever you want to call them, and you know, okay, the next thing I talk about is the process. Okay, I'm gonna have a chat about that. Then that can come across, I think, as much more genuine,
Mm-hmm.
more authentic, and you have more ability to engage and connect. Yeah.